Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Tang. I'm the lead coordinator of the Farm Animal Coalition. And, oh, thank you. And I'm the moderator today. I'm a bit nervous because speaking in front of two very experienced speakers like Jaya and Heidi is a lot of pressure. So please deal with me. So this session is about cage-free. The theme is cage-free conundrum. And we have two speakers here and today with us, so the time will be a bit longer. Before we start, as in our previous session, please add your question using the Hoover app. So you can even upvote the question that you might think should be important to address by our speaker, and then we will get it to our speaker at the end. Not taking much longer, I'm going to introduce the speaker today. The first speaker, Heidi, is the president and program director of Animal Kingdom Foundation. She oversees the overall campaigns and program of the organization and ensures that the works toward the attainment of its vision and improve the living condition of the animals in the organization. The second speaker, Jayasimha, is the co-founder and chief operating officer of Global Food Partners. Yeah. Global Food Partners is an international consulting company focused on higher welfare products, particularly cage-free eggs, sourcing and production. With nearly 20 years of experience in growing the animal welfare movement in Asia, Jaya has held significant roles, including Managing Director of Humane Society International India and Founding Director of the Animal Law Center at Nansa School, University of Law in Hyderabad, India. First, I would like Heidi to come and give her presentation. So please, Heidi.
All right, so good morning, everyone. How are you today? Hi, thank you so much. It's been really a very wonderful time to be here in Vietnam, to be with all of you. And I've seen a lot of familiar faces, and these faces has been our friends and allies in the animal welfare movement. And I've seen also new faces this trip, and we're also very happy that we would be working together again towards this animal welfare and protection movement. My first AFA was in Nepal way back. So please don't ask me when was that, because I think that's really irrelevant, but that's how long I have been in animal welfare. And thank you, of course, AFAD, for this opportunity to share. We've been to share what we have been doing in the Philippines and what we have been attempting to create. As much impact in the Philippine animal welfare and protection. I'm here to share with you insights on how our lobbying works, and I hope that you will be able to learn from it and apply the same in your works as well. Just briefly, let me introduce Animal Kingdom Foundation to you, especially to those who has not been aware of Animal Kingdom as yet. We are a Philippine-based animal welfare NGO and known for our dog meat trade or elimination of the dog meat trade campaign over the years. We also operate the biggest animal rescue and rehabilitation center for dogs and cats, and we have also started or operated the first ever cage-free model farm in the Philippines, and proud to say that it is where all cage-free learnings and immersions is happening. Our core campaign is, as I mentioned, the dog meat trade or End the Dog Meat Trade program. And in 2016, our founder, Charles Wartenberg, asked me, Heidi, would you like to take on a farm animal welfare campaign? And of course, I replied a resounding yes. And when he asked me what kind of farm animal welfare I should work on, well, I said, I was born in the year of the rooster. So in 2018, we launched our cage-free campaign with HSI. And I would like to thank Jaya, because Jaya was with us during that time, and he had been working, helping us in the start of our cage-free campaign in the Philippines. Thank you, Jaya. So we are all here now together working for the cage-free campaign. As key objective of my presentation, it is my hope that at the end, I will be able to share insights on the different policy initiatives that we have been doing in the Philippines, and also to share key provisions on health for hen welfare, and to be cognizant of some of the key considerations and learnings in cage-free policy development. But first, if you haven't really started on policy making in your own country or as part of your program or campaign, it's very important for us to know why cage-free policy is even necessary, and why do we need to lobby for such policies. In our work in the legal profession, it has always been important for us to have a legal basis or a legal groundwork or foundation to anchor our argument or position. Considering that we are pushing for change in the improvement on how we use animals in farm and for food, legal basis or framework is crucial for clear definition of policies, roles, responsibilities, including liability for non-compliance. Hence, cage-free policy or policy making in animal welfare and protection is important because it provides guidelines and legal basis for the implementation and compliance, and also it helps establish clear standards and references to operate and even for enforcement mechanism. It also serves as a government support or manifestation of government commitment towards our animal welfare and protection movement. And of course, also an important point is consumer or public protection against any fraudulent mechanisms. What are the key considerations to establish animal welfare or cage-free policies, which you may ask? Policy development, this is so huge, huh? Policy development work is never easy. And actually, I think the easiest really is the drafting of the policy itself. The preparation work, the groundwork is really the most taxing and the most complicated in policy development. So what are the key considerations? If you want to start policy program or campaigns in your area, please take a look at this suggested policy or considerations. First, legal references. I would like you to please take a look at your existing legal framework in your own country. Do you have Animal Welfare Act or policies? Do you have existing guidelines or any form of standards in your jurisdiction? In the Philippines, we made use of the existing Animal Welfare Act. We're so lucky we have that. We also have Administrative Order number 12, which is the welfare of hens or chickens, the Food Safety Act, and of course, as a member nation of the World Organization for Animal Health, we also use that as a reference. If you have these references, use this law as a basis to work or to begin your policy making or drafting. Understanding your current legal landscape also helps as you navigate the legal policy work. Otherwise, if you don't have any of this, don't be sad, because you can always make use of references abroad, foreign laws, jurisprudence, data, case studies from all over the world is important as well in your preparation for a cage-free or animal hen welfare policy. Other than that, you must also take a look at the industry readiness. Is your industry, particularly the poultry industry, ready for such policies? You have to take a look at that as well. Have you spoken to your industry leaders? Have you spoken or convened industry players so that you could start consultation? You should tap experts as well. In our case, what we did is that first, we intensified our promotion and awareness program. We took out Bounty as our industry champion. Bounty Fresh is one of the leading, or if not the leading, egg producers in the country as of now. So we took them on as our cage-free champion. We also consult leaders, we also consulted the government agencies to take a look at whether is the industry ready for a policy? Is the industry ready for them to be regulated in terms of their farm producing or egg producing business? Other than that, are your consumers also ready? Do you have consumers at all? Because in the first place, your policymakers, your lawmakers would not want to consider a policy unless there's a significant impact on demand, there's a significant impact on consumer, and thus you also have to take a look at that. Just to share with you some policy initiatives that we have started in the Philippines. The Philippine National Standard for Cage-Free Egg Production. This PNS, we call it PNS, was drafted in partnership and collaboration with the Bureau of Agriculture and Fisheries and Product Standards, which is a government agency in the Philippines. When we started working with them way back in 2020, few weeks or few days, I think, before the declaration of pandemic, we started or launched this PNS public consultation. So it took a lot of effort in terms of meetings, revisions, collaborations, and of course, consultation with the industry players. And thus, a year after, or I think that was around July of 2021, the PNS for cage-free egg production was approved and was published as a policy. So what are the key components of these standards, if you may ask? Of course, we have to take a look at two factors that would impact hen welfare, and thus it's necessary that the provisions would include space requirement, locomotion, nesting, flooring and litter, lighting, temperature, ventilation, environmental enrichment, farm management. These are the key components of the standards that you may need or would need to be inputted in your own policies as well. Because of this PNS, or the Philippine National Standards, Bounty Fresh has taken interest and wanted an NGO certification to begin or to strengthen their cage-free shift or program. Hence, in February this year, after a series of checks, audits, thank you so much, Tony and Irvin, for doing that, and a lot of meetings as well, Bounty Fresh in February this year was granted or was given the first ever cage-free certification by a non-profit organization. This prompted, of course, other egg producers to apply for a certification, and some food businesses as well has taken interest. So expecting that this PNS would evolve, and as a necessary positive consequence, we started also to work on the certification guideline. This certification guideline, of course, would set out standards on how we would also issue certificates to those who would want to avail them. While we appreciate the trust and effort being given to us by the industry leaders and the food establishment, we believe that a government-led cage-free and free-range certification is better and more beneficial. While AKF has been establishing its own NGO certification, we believe that it's more consistent and standard to have a government-led industry certification. And also, it's important that the consumers, the producers would have that certain degree of trust and confidence on the certification body. So, but why do we need a certification as well? We already have the Philippine National Standard for producers as a guide. We said that it's important for us to have certification standards or guideline because we would want to assure the public that animal welfare continues to happen in this certified cage-free farms. Also, consumer protection. We would not want misleading or false claims that the producers are selling or providing cage-free eggs to their restaurants or to their hotels, but in fact, they're not. So we want to regulate this. We want to make sure that consumer is also protected. On the part of the producers, it's a value-adding factor. It's a value-adding factor because it gives them pride. It gives them that sense of elevated pride that they are welfare friendly, that they provide more ethical food source to the public. And of course, let's not forget to mention the added price attached to it. Also, since we are working on these certification guidelines, what are the important factors or provisions that you also need to consider? What we need or what we did on our part is to include the following references: scope and coverage to provide who should be covered by the standard certification guideline, the administration, which is an internal process among the certification body, the requirement for any applicant, like documentary requirement needed, the inspection and audit needed, and the frequency of such audits, certification procedure, how would certification be processed, validity, how long would the certification be valid, the process for renewal, and of course, responsibility for the use of the label. And also finally, we have to also make sure that a cancellation provision or withdrawal of authority in the misuse of label is also present, so that, again, to ensure credibility and protection. Other than that, or other than the certification guidelines, AKF has also been working with the Bureau of Animal Welfare, the Bureau of Animal Industry Committee on Animal Welfare on the revision of AO12. AO12 is the revised code of practice and minimum standards for the welfare of chicken for food production. This AO was passed in 2002, and hence 22 years after, this is the first time that it's going to be ever revised. So what are the significant changes that we have inputted in this AO? One, it significantly considers the overall welfare of hens or birds, because this also not talk about just layers but also broilers, in all aspects of chicken life. It also introduced and defined cage-free, free-range, and other cage-free system in the industry. We also introduced a timeline for gradual implementation of welfare requirements for cage-free system operators, thus providing a leeway and avenue for them to comply with animal welfare and, of course, ultimately, to shift to cage-free. Other than that, another initiative that we have likewise been working on as an organization is the pushing for the revision of the Animal Welfare Act. We are currently lobbying for this revision, and included as part of the important provision in the bill for farm animals to be provided an opportunity to express natural or normal behavior. These guidelines or these provisions may be simple. They may not be a direct provision for prohibition or banning or even abolition, but it opens a whole wide world of opportunities for animal welfare consideration to come out during implementation. Again, as an again, we have to be ready that banning, ready and accept that banning is not immediately happening, and hence we are already opening possibilities that this is going to happen in the near future. So what are the best eggs to take away from this presentation? Work with your legal references. You have to know your legal references. You have to do your job, research. You have to work on linking case studies and all other references to strengthen your policies and your basis for a policy making. Work with your key leaders. Work with your government agencies. Come up with a champion or build a champion in your campaign. Strike a balance also in your guidelines. Don't be too pushy. You know, we always fight a good battle when we know that timing is important. And also campaign and promote extensively your campaign and your policy. On a final note, I can say that AKF's effort to policy development and strengthening in the Philippines is aimed at ensuring the welfare of farm animals will be protected in the next generation to come. We may be just laying the foundations now through policies, but with our combined efforts, we will get there. Would you agree with me? Would you agree with me that us being here today begins not just our journey, but our direction towards a better and improved animal welfare and protection in the near future? So with that, please let's give each other a big round of applause. We deserve all this. Thank you so much, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Heidi, for a very clear and inspiring talk and clear instruction on how you want to be involved in the policy of developing cage-free for the better life of chickens. And now I would like to invite Jaya to come and shed more light into the strategic transition towards cage-free egg production in Asia. Jaya.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a privilege to speak after Attorney Heidi. I still remember meeting in Vegas, I think, when we spoke first time about cage-free many years ago, and to see all the progress that's happening in public policy. When you really look at Asia, I think one thing that comes to our mind is, what's the real value of corporate commitments? In a sense, like, wet markets come to our mind. There's such a huge informal economy. And it almost seems like public policy is the real way to get a huge amount of transition to be done. And we have colleagues, for example, using a similar book, what Attorney Heidi is doing in Philippines. We have Gauri, Shreya, and others who've been pushing a litigation in India using the 1960 legislation to actually prohibit cages in India. We have similar work happening in Malaysia and many other places where the old law kind of exists, and it's a matter of getting them to extend. But while public policy has a huge impact on the total number of animals, it's really hard to get, primarily because of agency capture. When you really look at the Bureau of Animal Industries in the Philippines, or the Bureau of Indian Standards, or the Food Safety Standards Authority of in India, they're like primarily controlled by animal agriculture industry, and trying to get these regulatory bodies outside the grip of the industry so that they're able to regulate is actually pretty hard. But always having a relatable role model saying that, hey, you know what, cage-free can be done. We aren't asking you to go back to like 1970s back litter system or deep litter system. We're not asking you to go completely backyard. It's something that can be done at scale, it can be done well, and it is where the future of demand of the younger generation is coming is important. And for that reasons alone, it's really important that in the next 18 months, we focus on trying to get those cage-free commitments met. There have been so many global food companies have made those cage-free commitments. We know that that might not necessarily get every bird in Asia out of cages, but I just want to kind of super emphasize the importance of getting that small percentage out of cage, because if we don't build that building block where we have corporate commitments, multi-billion-dollar companies, and these companies have the ability to pay and get these birds out of cages, and if we aren't successful there to make a case saying that we need a national legislation, not saying it's impossible, it only gets harder and harder. And to that element, I would like to spend the next 10, 12 minutes to talk about some of the issues with cage-free commitments in Asia, I think most of which that anyone would know who is working, and also talk about a program that Global Food Partners pioneers to kind of find a way around that. Quick introduction, we are Global Food Partners, so we have our colleagues here, a big shout out to them. We are based out of Singapore, and we work in about 8 countries in the region with a single focus on helping companies meet cage-free commitments. That's all we do. And it's been very good because that focus also gives us deep understanding of each of those markets where we work. And we've been able to work with many food businesses in the region, mostly global as well as local, from Unilever to Super Indo, helping them develop a roadmap to transition to cage-free by 2025. When you really look at cage-free commitments and what really is the biggest bottlenecks, in the sense like, what's the big deal? Like, why can't just farmers transition to cage-free? Why companies can't buy cage-free? You see that there are like multiple barriers for the transition to happen. And I'll just like quickly go through some of these barriers. I think one of the first barriers is just the low quantities of cage-free egg production. We know our countries really well. Our countries are dominated by wet market. Our countries are dominated by informal markets. These cage-free commitments are a small portion of the entire egg production. So even when large companies make cage-free commitments, they pick up the phone and talk to the producer saying that, well, we want cage-free eggs. Those volumes don't make sense to the producer to actually transition. Or when they do transition, then it becomes really expensive, or it's just not available. Like, for example, in the US, you could have the same producer, a mega producer who has cage-free eggs as well as caged eggs. You can pick up the phone, call, and they do the transition. You need to it's really hard because there's just very low quantities of cage-free egg production. And that kind of goes to the fact that food business has very little leverage over them. Then I think many of the issues that Attorney Heidi touched on, sourcing and product identity, somebody claims to be cage-free. Is it actually cage-free? How do we know it's cage-free? Are we actually paying more? What's the standard on the ground? All of these questions kind of arise, and companies are like, well, we don't even know when we are paying extra, we are actually getting those cage-free eggs. Then there's the issue with like transportation cost and lack of infrastructure. So let's say Philippines, where you have some farms in the north, but then you have hospitality industry somewhere in the south. It's really hard to get those cage-free eggs there. Or Indonesia, where you have most of the cage-free farms in central Java, but then you have consumption happening all the way in Bali, or it's happening in Medan. How do you really get those eggs to transfer at very low volumes? Or India, where cage-free eggs are being produced in southern India, and you need eggs in Jaipur or Calcutta. It's again very hard to get these eggs transported, and obviously the cost adds up as well. With hospitality, we also see another issue with like seasonal demand and seasonal consumption, inconsistent demand. So you could have a ski lodge in northern Japan, Maho will know more about this, where it gets really busy during winters, tourists are going, then most of the years there's really nobody there. How does an egg farmer manage their flock to say, okay, now start laying eggs because tourists are coming, stop laying eggs because tourists are not coming? And what happens to all those birds who are there? How do you kind of manage that flock? And it becomes really difficult for farmers to manage that particular flock. And the other issue is that even if you were to say, well, could they not, like, when seasonal demand is there and when the demand kind of comes down, could they not just sell this in open market? The fact is that there isn't a huge retail demand for cage-free eggs. If there is, it's already observed, as in you can go to like maybe a high-end supermarket and you see cage-free eggs, but they're not necessarily the top sold off one, in the sense like, they still kind of lay there and some returns happen. So in the sense like, it's not like there's a sudden increase in production and there's an oversupply. You can go to a local supermarket, stock them up, and it'll all get sold, and then you stop stocking. And also you have to negotiate a contract with the retailer, SKU. It gets really complex. So even when there is an excess production, it's really hard to absorb them. On the producer end, there are multiple issues, and disease and flock health is a major problem, and just building capacity of stocks personship. And from the consumer end, that's also a nightmare, because you have like 2 cage-free producers in a country or 4 cage-free producers in a country, all small scale. What if there's a disease outbreak on that farm and they cull those birds? Where do I get my cage-free eggs from? Or where do I get my eggs from on the farm? It gets really hard from the company. And also the incentives, right? As in the Daewoo Hotel's F&B manager, even if they were to have a cage-free commitment, their job is dependent on the fact that at 5:30 when the buffet opens, there's got to be eggs. Like, there's no excuse to say, well, I had a contract with one cage-free farm, and then there was a flooding on the street, and they had a disease outbreak. Sorry, no eggs. Right? Doesn't work. So it's really hard for an F&B manager or a procurement manager, because their incentives are set in a way that they got to have those eggs on the table, and with cage-free eggs not abundantly available and it being super nascent, it's hard for them to meet this. And all of this kind of significantly increases the cost of cage-free eggs. Finally, food businesses, like every other business, has to make money. And while for all of us in this room, animal welfare, like we would do whatever and like put animal welfare over money, but that's not how most of the world's economy or economic system works. And it somehow needs to make economic sense. And it makes economic sense at a percentage level. But beyond that, every business is making this pain versus gain calculation. What's my pain of getting cage-free eggs? What's the gain for doing it? Or what's the gain of actually buying cage-free eggs? And if I don't buy them, what's the pain do I have? At any given point of time, if the gain of going cage-free is somehow lower than the pain, then I'm going to do it. That's it. So in the sense, it's that particular balance that we'll have to keep looking in our mind, in the sense like what motivates a company who is answerable to their shareholders to derive the most profit to actually spend 40% more or 50% more or 100% more on cage-free eggs or higher welfare eggs. Is that consumer demand? Is it investor pressure? Is it legislation? Or is it everything? We don't know. But in the sense like it could be a part of something. But then finally, the challenge really is that when the significant cost increase happens, companies will do it for their live buffet counter, they will do it for their 5-star properties, they'll do it to show, or they'll do it when the audit happens, and then they'll kind of just like stop doing it. So we obviously need a cost-effective mechanism where companies are able to meet their cage-free commitments. And looking at this, that's how we came up with our cage-free impact incentive. So we have a really fun video narrated by Global Food Partners co-founder and CEO, Lissy Lane, who is here. So let's look at this video and it'll explain what the system works. If, able to play the video.
Are you frustrated by being so close to 100% cage-free, but Asia is holding you back? Sick of hearing that cage-free eggs are either unavailable or too expensive? Struggling with low rankings on progress trackers? Don't worry, we're here to help. At Global Food Partners, we understand these issues. That's why we created our Impact Incentives, or Cage-Free Credits program. Just like you solved your soy and palm oil issues with credits, you can do the same for cage-free eggs. Cage-free incentives guarantee you can fulfill your commitment on time, even in challenging markets. And they're endorsed by leading animal advocacy groups like Mercy for Animals and the Humane League. Food industry leaders are also on board. Food manufacturing giant Unilever and the world's largest food service company, Compass Group, among others, have announced that they will use cage-free egg credits to fulfill their commitments. When you buy impact incentives, you don't have to change egg suppliers or worry about supply chain disruptions. You can source physical cage-free eggs wherever possible and fill the gap with credits, ensuring you meet your commitment on time and report compliance to stakeholders. You can then transition to physical cage-free eggs as the market matures. So how does it work? One cage-free credit or incentive is equal to 1,000 shell eggs produced by certified cage-free producers. When buyers purchase cage-free incentives, they directly support local, certified cage-free farmers that meet Global Food Partners' animal welfare benchmark. Unlike traditional booking claim systems, buyers know exactly who they are buying from, allowing for full transparency and traceability. Incentives can save you tens of thousands of dollars a year, are quick and easy, and allow for impactful storytelling to stakeholders. So how do you get started? It's simple. First, calculate the total number of eggs you want to offset. We can help. Based on the volume, we liaise with the producers and calculate the cost. Then you pay for the credits, and then you can report progress. Purchase your cage-free incentives today and start reporting 100% fulfillment.
Thanks. And this video is available on YouTube, and we have a bunch of resources on this. So the system, impact incentives based on what's called as book and claim. It's, as in the video, it's heavily used in many other sustainability initiatives, from sustainable aviation fuel to solar energy. Its offsets is what it is used. And when you really look at the difference between the physical segregation and the system, a lot of the problems that we spoke earlier, that could be the additional logistics cost or infrastructure, operational complexity, just the availability, it's because it's accounting, it's like flexible, you don't have to match the flock and the production. There's fraud production equal in both sides, or maybe even more in the impact incentive system, because farmers have to be certified by a benchmark third-party system. And there's obviously very low administrative complexities in doing this. And the good thing is, the companies that we talk to, they all do it for other commodities. They do it for sugar with Bonsucro credits. They do it with palm oil for the RSPO credits, that Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. They do it for soy with responsible RTRS and Proterra and multiple soy standards. They do it for plastic, like there's a huge amount of plastic credits that already exist. And the same companies that we are talking are also buying these credits overall. So the way it works now is, companies have three different ways to fulfill. In places where they are able to source cage-free eggs, they should be sourcing physical cage-free eggs. In places where they can't source cage-free eggs, so they source cage-free eggs wherever that's possible, and then they bridge the gap by buying cage-free impact incentive certificates. And it could also be that there are some places, because of issues of like minimum order quantity, like, you have an egg processor, they need like 10,000 eggs an hour to crack, whereas the cage-free demand is like 1,000 eggs. So in those places where it's really hard to actually even source these cage-free eggs, they could just buy credits. What's important is, in each of these systems, we get the same number of birds out of cages. So nothing changes as far as getting the birds out of cages. In fact, having credits only increases the possibility of getting the birds out of cages, rather than having only one option where companies have to buy cage-free, because then it ends up being black and white. So with our collective intention of ensuring that birds are able to spread their wings, stand up straight, lay egg in a nest box, perch, everything that's so natural to them, the possibility of only increases when credits are at play. So what companies can do is that they source physical eggs, and you saw that's what the language of Unilever, Compass, and in fact, recently the Krispy Kreme, and if Erin's here, shout out to her, put out a similar language that they will buy physical cage-free eggs wherever they can, and will bridge the gap by buying cage-free impact incentives. So you could buy physical eggs, buy impact incentives, and then you could report out it's there. There are a few quick case studies where how it would work. Now let's take, there could be a problem that, like, you can't source physical cage-free eggs in remote properties. So in maybe major cities, wherever the hearts are, you are able to source cage-free eggs. But there could be other places where it's really hard because of how the location is. So what companies do is, or it's really expensive, so it's available, but it's super expensive. All the problem might exist. So wherever they're able to source physical cage-free eggs, they're able to source physical cage-free eggs, and whatever is their deficit in that will buy credits and then meet their commitment and report it out. So the other case study could be hospitality companies. The problem really is that every hospitality company, each of their properties is owned by different people. The franchisee owners have to make a decision. It's really hard for them to get them to buy cage-free eggs. So there could be properties where, again, eggs are available, but some companies are willing to buy, some not willing to buy. They would buy physical eggs wherever possible in compliant properties. And they would just, like, the headquarters can do the math of the non-compliant properties, identify the footprint, and buy credits and meet the commitment and report out. So that would how it would buy physical cage-free eggs wherever they can, continue buying caged eggs and offset with incentives, and they say that their commitment is fulfilled. You could have QSR, where a big problem with QSR is their minimum order quantity. So in the sense, like, the egg processors have a very high order quantity and cage-free does not meet the minimum order quantity. So in those places, it's really impossible for them to meet their cage-free commitments at all. So they would just, like, 100% buy cage-free credits and meet their commitment. All of this, again, pain and gain, brings down the cost because there isn't a huge cost of transportation, there isn't a cost of segregation, so cage-free eggs end up being, or meeting commitments end up being 30 to 40% the cost of conventional eggs, which kind of does work for companies. And the beauty of it is that these credits directly help farmers. So on our website, we have farmers who these impact incentives support. So the money is directly going to the hands of farmers, and we obviously want to increase the total number of farmers that these credits will help. And yeah, so be it from hotels, retailers, manufacturers, farmers get the money. And we are really grateful for a lot of groups who are in this room and others who have supported this, because what motivates the companies is the fact that animal advocacy groups and trackers are saying that, okay, we understand that there are places where you can't buy cage-free eggs, but you can buy credits as long as you're able to show a pathway towards physical and report that out. So overall, it's a creative system. It's not a new system. It's something that's worked very well with other commodities. And if there's one thing that I would request all of you all is that 2025, if you're doing your strategic planning or whatever, I almost beseech you to put cage-free eggs commitments in your countries as top of the list. If there's one thing that we can do as a movement collectively, is when we meet in Delhi next at AFAD, and if we can, like, pat our backs that we were able to get those cage-free commitments met, the impact, the domino effect is really huge. We are at such a cusp of trying to get millions of birds out of cages, set out a path for public policy, set out a path for local Asian businesses to meet those cage-free commitments or set up cage-free commitments. This is the make or break 16 months for those egg-laying hens. And while there are many other issues that are really important, shrimp, duck, fish, I'm not saying that they are not, but if you're an organization who has the ability to have some flexibility within your working, make cage-free eggs the priority for the next 16 months. And then I'm sure we'll all be ready, guys. As Heidi said, for generations to come, we ensure that those birds are able to spread their wing and lead a good life. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jaya. And now it's the time for Q&A. So I'd love to invite you two to the stage and together with us. So we have some questions for you too. Thank you everyone for adding your question into the Hoover. So now I've seen a few, and I'll read a couple of questions from Hoover first. And in case you have anyone that you don't know how to put in, I can ask right in this room, but question in Hoover will be prioritized. So the first question, and I see a lot of interest in this question, and this could be applied to you, to both Heidi and Jaya. The first question is from audience that does the cage-free certificate standard you have applied internationally or only in the region? And is the standard the same as international standard for cage-free system like the humane certified? I know that you're not using standard, but incentive and yours. So Heidi, you want to go first?
Yeah. With respect to the certification standards and guidelines that we are developing, we've patterned that with East. Shout out to Jonathan over there. So we've patterned it to East. We've also looked into other countries' references, Switzerland and all, and we've tailored fit the guidelines in accordance to Philippine setting or Philippine requirement so that it's tailor-fitted with us. The beauty of this certification guidelines is that it also opens opportunity for foreign or third-party certification standard givers. So we just wanted that it be started by the government for purposes of ensuring both the public and the producers that level of comfort and security that the standards are going to be consistent in the industry-wide setup. But yes, we're open to international standard givers.
So our approach for standard has been benchmarking. So Global Food Partners has an animal welfare benchmark, which is available online. We believe that there are two components for benchmark of a standard. One is the standard itself, but I guess the most important element is standards administration. Because you can have a really good standard, but if the person who is actually going on the farm doesn't know what to look for, then the standard's not worth the paper it's printed on. Yeah, I think there are two elements of this. And I think the model farm that Attorney Heidi runs, or the model farms that Global Food Partners runs in Indonesia and China, we are always open to train auditors because we feel like auditors play a very important role. And even in our impact incentive system, auditors play an important role because we only certified cage-free farms can sell impact incentives. So yeah, broadly benchmarking as an approach is good. I would just say that there are multiple ways in which certifications could work. One is obviously a government certification scheme. I guess the big issue there is the scheme might be good. Is there possibility of corruption or bureaucracy within standards implementation? That's an issue. The second thing might be like just a pure third-party foreign standards is really good, but then it might end up being very expensive for the farmer. But then there could also be things like participatory guarantee schemes or cluster where there are many ways in which you could certify. So I feel like there isn't a straitjacket approach to certification. And it is going to be something that you'll have to meet the farmer where they are and grow with them. And again, create some sort of a reason for them to be certified because it costs more to be certified. So yeah, certification is important. And just building capacity of the farmers, and most importantly, ensuring that the auditors know what they're looking for ends up being super important.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Thank you, Heidi. We have another question. This is addressed to Jaya, but Heidi, you feel free to add more. So in China, government and the industry are keen to use technology to establish the cage system. But like to improve chicken's health, production, and operation with less problems. Does it affect your work in the region when communicating with the farms?
Right. I think one thing that we need to give credit to the animal agriculture industry is its ability to optimize, right? And be it AI, be it genetic technology, trait selection, whatever, they've done the best that they can optimize. And as technology develops, and even with like AI on like CRISPR technology with like gene modification, even though each of these technologies could potentially be used to improve welfare, right? In the sense like you could use AI to identify what that genetic trait of that bird which causes feather pecking and cannibalism is and knock that out. But people don't really do that. They end up using it for more production and like overall. So we do think that there is a chance, and if history is any example, that technology will be used to optimize on production and not necessarily on welfare. But then it also goes up to the fact that if there is a demand for a high welfare product, then farmers will cater to that particular product. So I think at this point of time, if the demands for cheap, lowest quality or quantity of protein, then I guess that's where it's going to get optimized. And that kind of rolls back to why these corporate commitments are so important. Because if companies were to say, nope, we want cage-free eggs, they'll optimize for cage-free eggs because That's how demand and supply of capitalism works.
Thank you. Heidi, do you have any addition?
Yeah, just a few. I think that we cannot get away with or turn our eyes or turn a blind eye with technology, with AI and all this technological or whatever development that's being introduced even to agriculture and farm production. And I guess as we build on welfare, animal welfare and protection in the practice or in the business, there will come a time that even with technology, a strong consideration on animal welfare and the provision for expression of natural behavior will also be considered.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point. Let's come to the next question about environmental impact of differences between battery cages and cage-free system. Can you shed a light on this?
The environmental impact. That's quite really a difficult question, but there's always make a reference to space consumption or space provision on and consideration on cage free, because they say that the more space we need, then the more land we use in cage free and free range would also have impacts on environment. And similarly, even if space is optimized in battery cages, again, there's also consideration in terms of carbon footprints, in terms of the waste, antibiotic use and all. So I think we believe that in while there may be an on and off environmental impact on each and every system that for cage-free and also for battery cages, I think what we really have to put into consideration now is sustainability and welfare and ethical source for our food.
Thanks. I think the issue with environment really comes up because companies are now looking with this carbon tunnel syndrome. Every conversation on ESG is like scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emission, and where does this fit into? And then it's really easy to say, well, these birds eat a little bit more feed, then maybe depending on the company, on my scope 1 or scope 2 emission, there is an increase. But I think what's happening is, are we able to change that narrative to say, you can't just be looking at everything at that super carbon tunnel, but environment and ESG goes beyond that. For example, it's already documented in many places, like a really well-managed cage-free farm can have lower housefly infestation in comparison to an open caged facility where the manure just falls down and it's like filled with houseflies. If anybody who's ever been to a cage farm, you know that like there's a housefly infestation is a huge issue on this farm. Similarly, with relation to air quality, there can be an issue, or with like manure overflow into and having downstream water impact when you have an upstream cage farm, like there is a big issue. In fact, in India, NERI, which is like the government's most apex environmental body, did a study to show as to the environmental impact of cage-free is much lower than cages. So I guess like it's shifting that perspective from a carbon tunnel to a much larger issue with relation to environment. The other issue also is that in cage-free farm, when you have better stockspersonship, the animals are healthier. That means like it's lesser use of non-therapeutic or even therapeutic antibiotics, which is mostly a non-therapeutic one is a broiler issue, but then still lesser use of antibiotics. And then you have the One Health as a concept that comes in that, you have a healthier bird, a healthier farmer, a nutritious food. So I just feel like, again, it's an excuse to say and saying that, oh, well, it's environmentally not healthy because like the bird's eating 20 grams more feed. But I guess like to change and say ESG goes beyond. And in fact, I would definitely say that cage-free farming would take up way more SDG goals than a conventional cage farming. So it's definitely a win-win-win for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Are you ready for a very, very tough question here? Well, we have animal welfare activists and animal rights activists, and sometimes there's some dividends like between the two, like ways of seeing things. And I know this is really sensitive issues and could be debatable, but I don't want to avoid it. So I'm sure you two are experienced enough and knowledgeable enough to answer this, and hope you don't mind. So some people are saying that selling the good labels, animal product with good labels, make people just feel better, and it could justify the continue ongoing killing of animals. Why, like, this is from another angle. So what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with you. That was a difficult question, but I think we've anticipated that. Well, one, I believe that shifting to plant-based or veganism is a journey that I think we have already, because the plant-based movement, animal welfare, animal protection movement is here all together. And it's a journey now that we are both working together versus in the past that we have been completely apart while we have only one goal. But with this now, it's not like, it's not, we should not say that it's selling better sourced or welfare friendly food sources or food will just make us feel better. Again, it's a journey. It starts from there. It may not make us feel good, but at the end of the day, it helps us process. It helps us get there. It's not an overnight battle to win, but it's a long journey. But again, what I'm telling you is that we are working there, and I think together, not you alone in the plant-based vegan advocacy, not just us on the welfare animal protection advocacy, but together, while we may be doing it in two different directions, we have the same goal. And I believe that since we are here together, let's not put that language, that message that, what you're doing is just making people better, feel better. But that's not really the way. No, it's another step. It's another journey. And again, we can work this out together.
Very good answer. And I think when you really look at the science, like, high welfare legislations have been passed, for example, in California. And is anyone here who would disagree that California is probably haven for plant-based and ethically eating? Does anyone say, no, California is really bad, you get only meat? No, right? Let's say if the US state, if they say one state which should come up with top on plant-based, you would say California. California also has the highest amount of animal welfare legislation. It's illegal to sell eggs from cages in the state of California. So it isn't like that's driving people to say, oh, now it's cage-free, let me start eating. So I feel like there isn't a science to show that when welfare increases, people somehow stop eating plant-based, or they're deterred from eating plant-based, and then they'll actually start eating more of animals. So there isn't science to show. And Germany is a great example. Germany has one of the top animal welfare laws. And if you were to follow Mahi's posting on the fast list, it almost seems like the meat consumption is reducing in Germany. So there isn't directly correlation on that. The second thing is, you'll be surprised as to how little people know how eggs are actually produced. In fact, a lot of companies who end up meeting their animal welfare commitments don't talk about meeting their animal welfare commitments because they don't want their consumers to know, shit, is that what you were feeding me all these years? You'll actually very rarely see companies who met cage-free commitments, like McDonald's in the US has met their cage-free commitment. When you walk into a McDonald's in the US, you don't say, we are cage-free from 2025. They don't talk about it because consumers already are not aware, and the companies are not doing anything to draw the attention of their change. So I think that's the second element. And I guess the third and the most important aspect is that cage-free labeling, animal welfare labeling, and again, they're not perfect. For example, there are standards which are a humane wash. There are standards, to my earlier question, that we have a really good standard, then it's just not implemented well, and there could be a problem. It's not to say that just by having a higher welfare label, somehow it's magical. And also to the fact is that cage-free is not cruelty-free. It's not. And cage-free farming is still intensive animal agriculture. It isn't anything better in that sense. But from an animal's point of view, is there a marked difference? Welfare Footprint Project would agree, the science would agree. And I feel like, are we going to make perfect an enemy of good when there isn't a science to back that up? If we had science to back that up, it says that, okay, Here's Whole Foods. Whole Foods stocked 5 Freedom high welfare chicken. They were also stocking Impossible. The minute they met their 5 Freedom higher welfare, somehow Impossible's purchase dropped. Then you would be like, oh damn, we are creating a problem here. But that isn't happening. So I guess while I understand the instinctiveness of it, there might not be science to back this up for us to recede on the welfare reform.
Thank you very much, Jaya and Heidi. I totally agree. I think we mentioned this in the opening ceremony with the two really inspiring keynote speakers about good cop and bad cop. So each organization has its own role in the whole movement. And there's enough infighting. So the least thing that we should is fighting ourselves in the movement. So yeah, let's respect each other's work, and everybody here is trying to make a better life for animals. I would want to open floors for one question from the audience here to directly question the speakers here, if anyone up for that. Okay, so there's many other questions so I don't think we can go through all, but maybe at least the last question before we take a break. This is about, well, it's in not only Southeast Asian, very similar in very many Southeast Asian countries, not only in Thailand. What the person asked, could we trust the cage-free egg producers with no certified humane labor or anything that is normally or often found in the market, like in Thailand or even in Vietnam or some countries?
Yeah, I think, again, it kind of goes back to the issue of trust on certification isn't unique for eggs. It kind of goes back to the system that how good is your tort claim law in that particular country, right? Even in countries where the US, where there's class action tort, where you can like drive a company down to bankruptcy, there are false claims. Like if you all remember a few years ago, there was this rage of 5 Fingers barefoot running shoes, which ended up being like a completely false claim, and there was a class action against them, and they had to like refund everybody the money they did. So I think like some of these issues are inherent in the business, and it cuts across products and commodities. And hence I feel like there's a watchdog work for everyone, right? In the sense like, does having cage-free commitment alone work? No, in the sense like you need to have somebody to hold them accountable. You need somebody like Global Food Partners who will provide solutions. We need somebody like Heidi who will provide the regulatory framework for this to be met. We'll probably, in India, Gauri's team who's here is incubating a new consumer group, which is looking at labeling, false labeling, what's happening. I think that's also important. So yeah, I'm not saying, pushing it away, saying that it's not an issue. It's definitely an issue. But I would at least say that if knockoff cage-free eggs are coming into a market, it might be an indication that cage-free is kind of picking up. So in the sense like, so maybe then you kind of form an association and start solving these issues. As Heidi said, this isn't a sprint race that we can win somehow over. This is a relay running race, and it's a really, really long relay running race. And all we can do is find, run. And I feel like if we were to sit saying that, oh my God, we do this, this is a consequence. And then if we do this, there's another consequence, then we can be like in the state of policy paralysis for years to come while these birds continue to be in cages. So I guess the issue is, it's really important. Certified humane is a good standard. I know that Heidi's standard is a good standard, and I think there are a few others which are really cool. There could be some that are scam, but that scam is an opportunity for anyone within your own countries if you want to like start up like consumer facing action on false claim. Vandana, who is here, actually did a federal commission, I don't know, Federal Trade Commission complaint against one of the largest certifier in the US on how bad their farm was. So again, it's a call for activism rather than reason to not to do it, if that helps. Yeah.
I would agree with you there. I would definitely agree with you there. A case in point, in the Philippines, there's also an active movement for organic products. And there was even also a legislation on the guidelines on organic products. But do we really trust the standards or the certification issued? That's also an existing issue or problem in the Philippines. But then again, just because there were issues, we should stop. Just because there were stumbling blocks or just because there are false claims, we should stop. I think it's human nature. It's part of what we are, that we make mistakes, that there are people who we don't really trust. But then it should not stop us. We should improve. If we have this piece of paper now, then maybe next time we should have 2 pages of it, just to improve it, just to make sure that we have the best protection for our certification guidelines. And again, it involves activism, it involves active monitoring, it involves all of us. While we entrust our government one way or another, we have to participate. We have to do our role as citizens. We have to take part as animal welfare NGOs, as animal protection groups, and of course the plant-based and vegan groups. We all have to work together to make sure that we have a trustworthy system certificate.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, that says a lot. And let's end this session with some excitement. Like it's because it's part of the one of the question here is like there are many commitments that is due to be applicable in 2025. And what are the things that we can do to hold those companies accountable for the 2025 commitment? Any exciting initiative from that you're aware of?
Yeah, I think few things. With credits in play, companies have no excuse not to meet their commitments anymore. You go to a meeting, they can't say not available, too expensive, this, that, and the other. So my key thing for anybody who's doing accountability work is don't take homework from companies. It's not your job, it's their job, and they have solution to do it. Very, very important. The second and the most important thing is, like, within your board, within your leadership, within your staff, try and go back and relay that this is an important aspect. And I think that there are some really good models. Aarti and team who are here, the Bharat Initiative for Accountability, which ended up being a coalition of local dog and cat groups in India who have now come together to hold companies accountable, answerable. I know that AEP is doing something as well in terms of on the similar lines. There are new initiatives that Divya and James are kind of seeding. And there's the Open Wing Alliance who has always been coordinating. And if you can find Noah, definitely chat up. So I think if you're not within, and again, at the sake of repeating myself, if there's one thing that you're able to work with your board, work with your leadership, work with your staff to realign, is the next 18 months holding companies accountable for their cage-free commitments. That's the only way we are going to have any value in the broiler commitments, shrimp commitments, fish commitments, pig commitments, whatever, plant-based commitments, reduction commitments, all of these commitments. If we let companies know that you can put a tweet, we'll pat your back, we'll celebrate, you don't have to do anything, we'll get busy finding the next tweet to put out, companies will give us easy victories and the birds continue to suffer.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much, Heidi and Jaya. And thank you everyone for joining this session. Now we have 15 minutes break. And please come back in time for the next session here. Thank you.